Welcome to another episode of the Endurance Physios podcast. My name is Dr. Sam Rockwater. I am joined, as always, by Dr. Will Gonzaba. How you doing, Will?
Doing great, Sam. Ready for another episode, dude.
Yeah, man. I think today's is going to be a really good one, too. Today, we are talking about barefoot running, all things barefoot running, kind of what started the craze, what really the goals of barefoot / minimal running are, the downsides of barefoot running. There are many. Spoiler alert. How to incorporate the minimalist shoes into training and daily life, and then also to who should avoid minimalist shoes, which is arguably probably the most important topic that we need to cover in this. Let's just jump right in. Will, tell me, how did barefoot running start? Give me a little background on that.
Sure. So I think both you and I were kind of in a unique place in our career when barefoot running really got popular, because I was just into PT school, and I think we're in PT school around the same time. So that's really when all of this began to get kicked off. So most runners out there will know a book called Born to Run. And this came out in 2011. And essentially, the idea of the story is a journalist who goes down to Mexico, I think, and lives with this native tribe to learn about how they produce so many outstanding, super long distance runners. And then what he drew away from that is that most of these guys are running in sandals, right? These very minimal sandals. And he gets to the conclusion of how modern footwear has shifted us away from what our foot should be functioning like, and that we need to go to this minimal footwear pattern in order to restore normal mechanics and strengthen the foot, yada, yada. So that's really, I think, where you can trace this minimal craze back to. So if you think prior to 2011, 2012, most of the shoe wear that was out, it was kind of like that traditional stability shoe is what I think of as kind of those Asics that were I don't know, they're not like the Nike Freeze, not as big as a Hoka, the cushioned Hoka. That wasn't a thing yet. It was kind of like this stability shoe, right? They were kind of clunky. And so this was sort of a total change from that, right? And so that really sparked the craze. You saw the Vibram 5-finger shoes come out. I remember at the time I was in grad school, like I said, and so I was running in these super minimal New Balance shoes, and so I think with anything,
just jump on that trend, man.
Yeah, that's, well, one, the colors were better, so that was a
Try
plus.
it. Why not?
Try it. Why not? I think there are some key. We'll get into it, but there's definitely some pros of incorporating the ideas behind this without being so extreme, and I think that's maybe kind of a good summary. Sorry to lead off with that. But that's really what it was in 2011. And so now you have all these people shifting from these stability shoes to minimal footwear, thinking it's going to change their stride pattern from heel striking to being more midfoot or forefoot striking. But it's not really that easy. And we know that as physios, right? And so it's not really as easy as switching the shoes. And if you don't do that with the proper training or introduction of that footwear, it can be a source of injury. But, we'll kind of dive into that later. I think when you look at it though, the whole goal of what barefoot or minimal running, and I'll just say in this podcast, we'll probably use barefoot and minimal running interchangeably. So, we're not necessarily talking about running barefoot. It could be just with a minimal shoe. The overall idea is that it's supposed to improve your run form and improve the strength of the foot and the surrounding support around the ankle joint. That's what I summarized it as. I mean, what do you remember of the Born to Run craze and the introduction of this footwear, and what have you seen as maybe some of any other goals that I missed of this?
I mean, it was a super controversial book, especially for research and stuff like that. And then it kind of did almost waged a little war of minimalist versus shod, which is considered a shod shoe is considered a cushion shoe. and it seemed to almost like wage this like research war onto which one was better. Um, and people would have heated debates about it. Like I remember going to some conferences and people were like getting into it um, when they were kind of defending one or the other. But you're right, 100% accurate. Same as what I remember is that those like the idea behind minimalist shoes was that you're to try and one strengthen your foot. So you're essentially supposed to use more intrinsic muscles within your foot. And then also too is supposed to improve your form slash make you not heel strike. So make you more of a midfoot or forefoot striker. So land on like the balls of your feet or on the toes of your feet, or essentially land almost like flat footed, not necessarily like so much like heel first, like what we do, like what most runners do. And that was like the big thought is, oh man, like everyone should be running on their midfoot or forefoot. And I mean, since then, now we know that that's not necessarily true. Not everyone has to run that way. Um, there are plenty of people who are super effective running heel striking, especially super long super long distances. Absolutely. But that was kind of like the very beginning of kind of the debates between should it be minimal, should you wear a really thick shoe, and then obviously Hoka came along, and that was another shakeup. The running shoe world was it was a crazy couple of years actually thinking about it. Like you got this minimalist idea, and then all of a sudden, boom, out of nowhere, Hoka comes up, and you're like, who are these guys? With just a big puffy like cloud cushion pillow underneath your foot. Just
Yeah,
total other end of the pendulum that you have.
people like extremes. I mean, I
So
think that
I don't
applies to
know.
like so many different
Yeah,
things. So, like, and people are so quick to say like it's always this or it's always that, and that's never the case. Like never ever. Um, but yeah,
yeah, never is.
like when you think about that, like I think of even like remember Newton shoes? Like I don't know if those are still out, but like basically they were
Yes,
designed with those
I think
like
they're still around, man.
I think they are too. I never see them here locally, but I think they're
What are they
I think
called?
you're right.
Foot
They are around.
pods? Or no, what were those called?
Those little
What were the
like things
little
that went over
bumps
the
on the bottom of the
metatarsals.
Newton shoes?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember. But those that was
I can't
the whole
remember.
idea was to like force you to be midfoot or forefoot
On
strike
those.
pattern. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Almost to like
it
train it
was
slash run in it all the time.
right. I
Yeah.
think I remember at the time. So I was let's see. So prior to Born to Run, I was in college and I had just gotten my first like private triathlon coach. And at the time, I was dealing a lot with shin splints, like with any bit of running. And I had no form coaching before, like was very, very novice. And the first thing my run coach did was have me increase my cadence. Number one, I think I moved to just a neutral shoe, not a minimal shoe, and improve where my foot was landing just by increasing my cadence. Like those two things, the neutral shoe, increasing cadence, that made me land more midfoot. But it took care of that neutral or the those shin splints like immediately. Granted, you know you're a 19-year-old kid, so like it's pretty easy to adapt to most stimulus that's thrown at you with very little adverse effects, right? That's not the case for everybody. But at
Yeah.
that time, again, being a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, we would do a lot of barefoot barefoot drills in the grass prior to track workouts once a week, and that's about as minimal as it got, you know. And I think there was value to doing it in that fashion because it was controlled in grass and it wasn't continuous, right? Like maybe you were doing some strides on grass or on turf that's like 20 or 30 seconds. You're doing some footwork drills, just things to, you know, your
Mm-hmm.
typical dynamic warm ups barefoot. I kind of think that's enough to get the stimulus into the foot without overdoing it. But I remember that from back
Yeah,
then.
I think that yeah, I know a few triathletes who still do that and who still kind of ground themselves or whatever you want to call that. Essentially, you get that stimulus where they are running barefoot to try and essentially do the exact same things as like a minimalist shoe slash barefoot shoe. Just literally they are barefoot and trying to like improve form and improve arch strength, improve foot strength, and those are really like the main goals of those minimalist or barefoot running shoes. I know some people still will cycle. I know a few athletes who will still cycle them in and out. So they'll wear those shoes, for, the warm up or whatever, or, they'll use them for very specific like track stuff. And then they will go and put on their other normal training shoes. But I mean, we can obviously talk about more about how to like incorporate them later. But what do you think are like the biggest downsides of minimalist shoes? We kind of pumped them up about like, oh, they're so good with form, or they can potentially be good with form. I guess they're not necessarily proven to be good with form, but they can be.
Mhm.
And it builds up arch strength, builds up foot strength. But like, what are the biggest downsides to them? Because there are a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the first would be just kind of understand what we mean by like a minimal shoe wear. I'm going to say that that's something that's minimal cushion at the bottom of the shoe, so very thin, and then it has a zero drop, so meaning that the heel height to the forefoot height is the same size, right? So it's flat all the way across. Okay, so knowing that, right, you've removed cushion and you've taken that heel toe drop out of the equation. Regardless of how your foot hits the ground, whether you're heel striking or midfoot or forefoot striking, you're going to be putting more stress onto your calves, onto your soleus, which is another muscle in the posterior leg, and into your Achilles tendon and plantar fascia. So just by removing that cushion and removing that lift at the heel, you're automatically putting more workload on those muscle groups. And there are people that would definitely be contraindicated to. So meaning like if you have plantar fasciitis, if you have an Achilles issue, we'll kind of get into people who should not do it, but just think like immediately just by putting that shoe on, those muscles are working hard. So that's one of the downsides. I think that the other one is just people who tend to overdo the training in the minimal shoe wear. Like you said, there's a way to incorporate it. And that's just moderately to minimally, right? Like you just can do a little bit of it in order to get that stimulus that you're looking for, right? So, but when you see these people that it's their speed workout, it's their daily shoe, it's the long run, that's just, in my opinion, like that will catch up to you at some point. And even if it's not, I would question whether you would just run better and be more comfortable if you were in, it doesn't have to be a very built up shoe, but just something that had a little bit more cushion and a drop, which kind of gets me to my next point that sometimes more cushion is good. Like I remember this so vividly. This was kind of coming out of this like probably 24. It's
Personally.
good, man. Yeah, I agree. Like it's a good thing. People talk about cushion like it's bad, but like I remember in 2014, I think, out of my tri season, I was still racing in this minimal shoe, and I couldn't get it again, and so I had to go to something that was more cushioned, and I was like, oh my god, this is life changing. Like I was immediately so much faster by just having still a neutral shoe, but just it had more cushion. So I think you look at like that's so much less shock and less force that's going into the foot and into the legs. Like why wouldn't you want that for distances or for racing? And then lastly, I think that, oh, go ahead, man. Do you have something on that one?
No, fire away. I'll
Okay.
shoot
Yeah.
afterwards.
Okay. Cool.
Go on.
Yeah.
You're on a
I'd
roll.
say,
You're on a roll.
okay. Lastly, they talk about these as like an injury prevention, like this minimal shoe wear as an injury prevention. And that's just not factual. So when I was in grad school, we did research on this. Again, that was right during this phase. And so we studied a group of marathon runners over 2 years training for the same marathon, right? In 2 subsequent years. And what we did was we did a video analysis of them running through a chute during a training run. So this was actually in the field. They did before and after summaries. And as they ran through the chute, we documented what type of shoe they were in. So was it stability, neutral, or minimal? And then what foot strike pattern they had. So were they heel striking, midfoot, or forefoot striking? And then through their questionnaires, we were gathering what their injuries were throughout the course of these 2 years of training. And what we found was that, so then we could classify these into different groups. Okay, so these are all our forefoot strikers, our midfoot, and our heel strikers. And then we could compare, did any of these groups have differences in the occurrence of injuries? And none of them did. They all had the same occurrence of injuries despite what type of shoe wear they were in. The only thing that, and I would also say, despite what their foot strike pattern was, so whether they were forefoot, midfoot, or heel strikers, none of those groups were injured more than the others within our research, at least. But what it did tell us was that people's foot
Nice.
strike pattern could help us predict what injuries they would sustain. So if they were forefoot striking or midfoot striking and in a minimal shoe, they were more likely to have calf strains, calf, Achilles, plantar fascia. Just as I was saying, one of the downsides are like you're going to overload those structures. So those groups are more likely to have those type
Mm-hmm.
of injuries. People who were heel strikers were more likely to have the knee pain and the hip pain, which is kind of what we know of heel striking when it's done incorrectly, right? If you're overstriding with that. So just to get to the point that just because it's minimal, like that's not going to prevent injuries. Like it might make you predisposed to certain injuries and maybe prevent other types, but not across the board as a blanket statement. Can you say that the minimal shoe wear is going to make you more resilient of a runner?
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's been kind of more of like what exactly, like in the research, it's some research is like pro minimalist shoe and some isn't. And I think you're spot on, and like your summary of like your what research you did is really like probably the best like use of minimalist shoes is that you might like get a stronger arch, but you might also predispose yourself to a different type of injury, um, and that like shock absorption. Like the reason why like when you heel strike you get a whole bunch of knee and hip pain is because people when they land on their heels, all that force, we call it ground reaction force. So that ground reaction force comes up through your heel, and normally you will try and have your calves, quads, hips, hamstrings, everything, all your muscles. Normally, you'll try and do. You'll try and essentially attenuate or slow down that force or decrease that force or absorb it. But sometimes your knees will take, actually all the time, your knees will definitely have some sort of piece to it, as well as your hips and your low back. That's why a lot of runners also still have like low back pain, and most of the time they're heel strikers. Um, is it bad to heel strike though? Absolutely not, right? Because if you all of a sudden if you change your foot strike pattern, it might be really hard to a run like that all the time. I don't know about you. I know I have tried like different cadences and tried different foot strike patterns. And after about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes is super concentrated, I immediately go back to heel striking just because that's my natural pattern. The faster you run, the more you run on more towards the balls of your feet. But like, in a marathon, very few people, even a half marathon or even like a 5K or 10K, most people cannot maintain a certain type of foot strike that is not their natural foot strike, just because
mhm.
inevitably you're going to get tired and fatigued and or forget to look at it. So um, yeah, I think that the stresses on the body are really worthwhile. With also too, another thing that I really want to emphasize too, and you just kind of briefly touched on it, is when you're a midfoot striker or a forefoot striker, the reason why you'll get more Achilles and calf strain is essentially that as you go, as you land on the balls of your feet, your heel will then drop once you get to mid stance, which is essentially when your foot is directly underneath your body. And in order to lower your heel down into that mid stance position, your Achilles and your calf and your gastroc and your soleus are all going to be used in what we call an eccentric way. And eccentric means that it is contracting while lengthening, which can also make you very sore if you never have done a midfoot and then all of a sudden you try and do it, you're going to get pretty dang sore in the calves because those eccentric muscle contractions do tear more muscle fibers down. So just kind of like wanted to essentially just touch on that because I know you briefly mentioned it, but I think it's important for a lot of our runners listening to understand why those injuries occur and why it's like more likely to have heel strike like knee hip low back, like okay, got it, but midfoot like calf and like gastroc soleus, but like why. And I think that hopefully will help some people kind of determine why they're getting those. So midfoot
Hmm.
going to have more stress and strain on that calf because you're going to slowly lower that heel down, and that can lead to overuse injuries. Versus if you heel strike, you're going to have more shock and force going up through your joints and into like your low back. You're not quite going to use your muscles as much, which is exactly what you were talking about in terms of predisposing you to new injuries versus old injuries, right? So you might take away your low back pain with running, but it also too might create an Achilles tendinopathy or tendonitis for you. So had to throw that in
Yeah.
there. I'm sorry. Well,
Yeah. So I mean,
went on a little
like you
rant
said,
there.
like no, no, but it's a good teaching points because it just shows like it's not as clean. It's not as man. It's not as advertised. It's not like you just get this and then all of a sudden you're a wonderful runner. Your foot is stronger. Here's your plantar fascia. You know,
Yes.
fixes the Achilles tendinopathy. And I think that's the disconnect that I see with some of my clients where they're like, okay, well, um, shouldn't I then be in a zero drop shoe all day and that will help my plantar fasciitis because like my foot needs to get stronger, right? You're telling me that's a thing. So why would I not want to be in the shoe? And
Take
it's
it and
like,
run. Take it and
yeah,
run.
you know what I mean? The way
Take
it's
it and run.
advertised
Yeah, oh,
is
yeah.
like it fixes all of that, but you have to, it's just so much more complex than that, right? Um, it may be in the asymptomatic,
Yeah.
the person who doesn't have symptoms, it's a good way to begin to introduce stress. But I'd even argue if you're doing high mileage and you're not used to walking around in a zero drop shoe all day, like that should probably be introduced conservatively if it's even appropriate, you know? But that does kind of bring us up to our next topic. So I think that we can agree. We're not just bashing, trying not to bash the minimal shoe wear. I mean, I think that there are some pros to it. It just has to be done the right
Time and
way.
a place
So
for sure.
time and a place, right? So
Yes.
I know you probably get this a ton in your clinic. So what are some of the ways that you educate your clients on like how to incorporate minimal shoe wear or some of these principles into their training or into their daily life?
Yeah. So I start at like the very basics, but there's a few questions normally that I'll ask them what type of shoe that they have currently. So say they're coming from Mizuno running shoe, because Mizuno is historically what we call a traditional drop shoe. So it's a 12 millimeter drop, which means that the heel height is 12 millimeters or 1.2 centimeters higher than where the forefoot sits. So it's a 12 millimeter drop shoe, which is considered on the higher end of shoes. A lot of shoes now are anywhere from 3, 5, 7, normally somewhere in that range. But say if they're coming from a 12 millimeter drop shoe and they want to go straight to a zero drop shoe, normally I will advise them that that's a very bad idea to just go straight into it. Um, Normally I will have them try and go from like a 12. Hey, why don't you try a 7 or a 5 millimeter drop shoe and see how that goes with your running? Slowly build it up, incorporate, that into maybe one or two of your runs throughout the day, or, throughout the week, excuse me. Um, if they want to go from, say, a traditional drop shoe, so a 12 millimeter drop shoe, in immediately into a zero drop, I normally will tell them, hey, you're not going to run in these, but I want you to walk around throughout the day just for, half a day and see how it feels. Um, and as they walk around, then they're going to slowly start to get used to them. Once they get used to them, then I'll have them do the full day, and then I'll have them walk around in the full day. I'll have them go out for walks, like say they have a dog. I'll have them, hey, why don't you walk your dog in your zero drop shoes, see how they feel. I will also too have them do shorter runs within like in their zero drop shoes as well. And then just make sure that they're really conscious of how it feels and what is exactly going on, and making sure that they're not getting any more injuries. And if they're starting to develop hot spots, that they come talk to me and we can essentially adjust as needed. But that's kind of how I'll start. And then once they get once they feel like that's pretty good with the dog walking and they're able to walk in them full time and they're able to do, a run or two a week and it's a short run, then I'll have them start incorporating in 3 days a week and then 4 days a week. And then, if they run 5 days a week, then I'll have them run 5 days a week in them. But I will also to tell them to switch it up as well. So I won't have them solely run in that zero drop unless I know that they're super stubborn and they're just not going to listen to me unless I tell them what they want, and they'll say, hey, okay, you want to go completely zero drop? This is how you're going to do it. But otherwise, I'll say, hey, why don't you try a couple runs in these? Your longer runs still wear your middle of the road drop, or your high drop shoes. It's not going to affect anything with your zero drop. But that's kind of like the slow, gradual progression that I will use to essentially like get patients into that zero drop, whether they want to go right away or if they want to like wait, or kind of slowly ease into it, or they're just kind of I call them zero drop curious. But
Mm-hmm.
what do you do, Will? Do you normally do it the same way, or
Yeah, I think the
for those zero drop
gradual
curious people?
zero. I'm curious. You know what I like to ask is like, what is your perception that you're going to get out of the zero drop shoe? You know, like what, why, like why? Number one, like let me just
Yeah.
understand like what you want. Why? What's the purpose? Because I think that can help dictate some of the education and just kind of understand where they're coming from. Um, I'm with you on the gradual progression. I think you gave a nice summary. I think that can look different for everybody, just kind of based on where they're at. So I'm with you 100% on gradual progression. The other thing that I'll tell them is, go zero drop, but keep some cushion. So there are some shoes out there where you can get the zero drop wide toe box, which is something we didn't talk about. So one of the other benefits to like barefoot running, or a lot of those barefoot running shoes, are the wider toe box, which I think a lot of running shoes nowadays are kind of coming around to that wider toe box anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But that wider toe box is
Yes.
a lot better. I think, just it lets those toes splay out. And that can prevent like a lot of different issues. But so go zero drop to answer your question. So get a zero drop shoe, but keep it as a cushion shoe, like an Ultra, for example. Like all of their shoes, for the most part, I think except for one model, are zero drop shoes, but they have various amounts of cushion, and they all have the wide toe box. So to me,
Mm-hmm.
that's your happy spot, because you get the zero drop, you get the wide toe box, and like those are basically to me the two biggest benefits to running barefoot. So like running that, I can't ever think of someone I would recommend running or training in like a Vibram 5 finger shoe. I saw someone in my neighborhood. He did a long run, man, because I left to go run an errand, and I saw him running down my street, and I came back an hour and a half later, and he was still he was still running in the neighborhood, and I was like, damn, that's a long way to be going in those Vibrams, man. And I don't want to say like that's reckless, but I don't know, man. That just seems like you're asking for a stress fracture or something to happen, man. So
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
education of my patients is like, go zero drop, but keep the cushion, and then just basically using like an Ultra. I plug for them there. Um,
There you
and then I
go.
think
Have you ever heard of
lastly,
Topo shoes?
oh yeah, yeah. Actually, I have.
Sorry. Sorry, real quick. Have
I've
you ever
I,
heard of Topo?
yeah, I have heard of them.
They have like a 3 millimeter drop but wide toe box.
Okay,
So
cool.
their idea is that they're kind of like in between.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Just
think
curious. Anyway,
actually,
sorry. Continue.
no, 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 I have, and I actually I did a run analysis with a guy, and he really liked Topos. I actually had never had seen them before, and he brought in like 3 or 4 different pairs of them, and like we did analysis in those actually versus a couple other shoes, and yeah, it was pretty interesting. Um, but yeah, I've heard really good
Nice.
things about them. I do want to try them. I think Ultra also just came out with a 4 millimeter drop road shoe, which I'm pretty intrigued by, because I feel like they do a really
Yep.
outstanding job on their other products. I don't personally run in ultras, but I really
Yeah.
like them in the day to day. But I would be
Mm-hmm.
interested to try that, because I feel like they innovate well. Um, yeah. So
Sure.
I would say probably the
Sure.
last thing that I recommend for patients that are kind of just think about ways you can achieve what zero drop shoes advertise other ways. And so one of those things you can do is strengthen the arch just by strength training barefoot. So I always tell my patients, like, you can pretty much make any standing exercise a arch exercise if you're being cognizant of how your foot is engaging the ground. And I don't think we have to go into like the mechanics of that, but I think where you put your intention behind your movement can have a big effect on how you recruit the foot. So you can train the foot, you can get it stronger just by strength training barefoot. So I think that's for a lot of
Yeah.
people, that's probably enough stimulus that you need to get those strength gains.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, there's lots of different ways that you can strengthen the foot. And I think that's a really important thing to note, especially when you have runners who are like, who that's their main reason why they want to do like zero drop or minimalist shoes is because they want to try and strengthen their feet. You're like, well, there's a lot of other things that you can do to strengthen your feet. Even walking around your house barefoot. Like it
Yeah.
sounds weird, but even walking around your house. Now, I live in Arizona. We have a cement slab, and then we have uh, engineered hardwood up on top. There's like zero give to it. So at the end of the day, like I got to put on socks or a little bit of shoe or something like that. But otherwise, though, I will try and walk around barefoot just to try and make sure that I'm strengthening my feet, because during the day when I'm in the clinic, I'm in shoes all day, all day, all day. And so, for like 10 hours at a time, 10 plus hours at a time. So I want to make sure that, I'm still getting some strength in my feet. I'll also too, pop my shoes off, and also try and like balance with some runners and patients and athletes that I'm training, just to try and help also build up foot strength. But I think we should talk about foot strength in a different podcast, because there's a lot of
Totally
different,
agree.
really good info on there. There are
We
a lot
should
of
do
really
that
good
as a live.
info that we can talk about in terms of like foot strength and like how to do it.
I love
Yeah.
foot
Yeah.
strengthening. It's one of my favorite
Like
things
that.
to do. Man, it's just so cool. It's a fun thing to nerd out on.
You're such a nerd.
But dude, we should do that as just from the ankle down. Just from the ankle down. We should do that as a
I like that.
live stream. Live stream? So we could demo some
All
stuff.
right.
Would that be possible?
Sure.
Yeah, we can try
Sure.
it.
Why
We can
not?
try it. Yeah, I'll bring the
Why
Mobo
not?
board. We'll bring
Won't hurt.
toys. It'll be fun. Yeah, we'll try it. What the
Yes,
hell?
it'll be great. I'll bring my Mobo board
Yeah.
too. We can have a Mobo board party.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Can we do a whole podcast
All
from a
right,
Mobo
now,
board?
no, no. I
It'd
would
be
love to
fun
say
to
I can.
try.
I need to start practicing then. Oh, God.
Mhm. All
We
right.
should
All
see
right.
how many people we can get on the live stream to do it with us too. But
Oh, that would be fun.
anyways,
We'll
back
try to send.
back to the topic at hand.
Yeah, here we go.
That was a great side side combo. But
Yeah.
I think the other question that we really have to answer here is like, who should avoid the zero drop shoe? Because there are people who certainly should avoid the zero drop shoe. I know myself, I am 100% somebody who should avoid the zero drop shoe, but I also have limited ankle dorsiflexion in my right ankle. And so I only get to about 0 degrees or so. Zero drop shoes are very challenging for me because just can't get into that much ankle dorsiflexion. Versus if I have a high, like say a 12 millimeter drop shoe, my foot is naturally in a little bit of what we call plantar flexion or pointing downward. And so I'm able to, I just have that 12 millimeters more of upward rotation of my foot, aka dorsiflexion, that I can use to try and essentially walk normal. So I know people like myself with limited ankle dorsiflexion are definitely somebody who should avoid zero drop shoes. But who else should avoid zero drop shoes?
Can I tell a story first, quickly?
Fire. Love
All right.
stories. Story time by Will.
I had
Here we go.
I had a patient. I had a patient who he came to me for like anterior ankle pain. So it was basically like right at the what we call a talocrural joint. So like basically the joint of the ankle, and that's where all the dorsiflexion that Sam was talking about occurred. So he had a lot of pain there and had, like Sam was saying, like zero dorsiflexion. That means like it did not bend. And he was always like, I should run in zero drop shoes, right? And I was like, no, absolutely not. That's the opposite of what you want to do. And towards the tail end of he was feeling so much better. And then he went to go do a speed workout, which he had never done in a long time, probably like a year. Went to this track club, did 800-meter repeats in like those, I forget the brand, but they are so flat. Like they're not only minimal, but there's like zero cushion under there. And it just lit that ankle up like so badly. It's like, dude, come on, man. Like, not for you, not for you. So if you know you have limited ankle dorsiflexion, so like the ability to bend it, that's just not for you. Other people who I think should definitely avoid the zero drop low cushion shoes are people who have a history of or active plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathies, or if you've had repeated gastroc soleus strains or an active one. We mentioned it earlier, and Sam alluded to it now, but like you go zero drop and you're just loading all of those muscles, the plantar fascia, the Achilles tendon, the gastroc, the soleus, so much more. And so that's really not a good indication to do that. You got anything else? Anything else to add for people who should avoid the zero drop minimal?
I think the only other real like person who like kind of like meh, is more of a yellow flag is anyone who has any sort of instability. So somebody ankle instability. So somebody who is sprained their ankle ligaments repeatedly or sprained or rolled their ankle repeatedly. I also fall into that category. So I am two out of the three strikes there between limited range of motion, repeated ankle strikes. I knock on wood here. Do not have any plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendinopathy, or gastroc strains. So we're going to try and keep it that way. But I think people who also just have a lot of instability in that ankle, because as you go into that midfoot, again, you're going to use a lot more intrinsic muscles of your foot. If you're not strong enough, that foot and ankle and the ligaments that kind of hold everything tight and taut together, that is going to stretch out. You're going to roll your ankle, and or you're going to predispose yourself to more injuries, like we've already talked about. So I don't want to beat a dead horse with that, but it's certainly something also too to be kind of cognizant of. That's all I have for I can really think of people who should really like avoid the zero drop. Like I said, I think there's a good time and a place for them. And there's certain people who should be running in them, or certainly people who shouldn't be running them, myself included. But I don't know if there's anything else that you want to kind of touch on, Will, for like barefoot running and zero drop shoes.
No, I don't think so. I think we summarized who shouldn't do it, and I hope that this episode didn't come across as us bashing it, but more of just shedding a light as to like when it's appropriate and when it's definitely not appropriate. So hopefully you guys can just identify which group you fall into, and have some better definition as to like whether this is actually good for you or not, because it'll always be advertised as like a really great thing. And so you just have to be educated on is it actually going to do what it's telling you it's going to achieve.
Yeah. And the other thing too is if you're not sure, please go seek a medical professional who can help walk you through that, somebody who's qualified and somebody who, knows running and knows what zero drop shoes and what their forces that they produce and that kind of thing, and just go talk to them. If you don't know, you're more than welcome obviously to message Will or myself. Instagram's probably the best way. My Instagram is the endurance physio, THE, and then a second E. So it's two E's for the and endurance and then physio. Will, what's your Instagram so then people can message you too?
Yeah, you can get my personal Instagram at Will Gonzaba, and then you can get my business, my clinics at Almost Park Physio. That's OLMOSPARK PHYSIO.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's good, Will.
Yeah,
That
let's wrap
was
it up.
fun actually to talk about.
It
It
was.
was really good. So thank you everyone for listening. Please like and subscribe. Do a review. That would be wonderful because then more people can find us on that lovely thing called an algorithm. But even better, if you can, please send a friend this podcast so then they can learn and then they can hopefully get some entertainment out of it. Will, you got something else there?
Yeah, I had it, but then I forgot it. It's gone. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm
it's
sorry I
gone.
did.
It'll be
But
back
thank you.
next
Thank you.
episode.
It'll be
That's
back.
okay.
Yeah, it's gone. I'm sorry.
There you go. Awesome. You're good.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you guys for listening. Please like, share, follow, subscribe, and more importantly, send it to a friend. Otherwise, we will see you guys on the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.